Donald Trump has ordered a pause in intelligence sharing with Ukraine as part of his suspension of military assistance to Kyiv. It's a move that could seriously affect Ukraine's ability to target Russian forces and to defend itself. But Mr. Trump has suggested he may be willing to continue talks with Kyiv, and President Zelensky has said that Ukrainian and US teams are working together with what he called forward momentum. President Macron of France has tonight announced that he plans to hold a meeting of European army chiefs in Paris next week, saying he wanted to believe the US would stay at Europe's side, but it had to be ready to fend for itself. We'll have more on that in a moment, but first from Washington, here's Sarah Smith.
America is back.
And of course, Donald Trump is back. 5 years since he last spoke to Congress. In this speech, he was able to signal that tensions between him and President Zelensky may be easing and peace talks could soon begin.
Simultaneously, we've had serious discussions with Russia and have received strong signals that they are ready for peace. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't that be beautiful?
Russia is, for now, still launching deadly attacks on Ukraine. Assaults that will be much harder to prevent now America's stopped sharing military intelligence, as well as halting the supply of weapons and equipment. The US believes that by harming Ukraine's ability to defend itself, they have forced Mr. Zelensky to talk about peace on Donald Trump's terms. Today, White House officials are already making plans for renewed talks with Ukraine.
Just in the last 24 hours, since the public statement from Zelensky, and then these subsequent conversations, which I'm going to walk inside and continue, I think we're going to see movement in very short order.
They did.
President Trump addressed the controversial trade tariffs he's opposed on Canada, Mexico and China, which many fear may spark a global trade war, saying Americans may have to pay a price, but it would be worth it.
Tariffs are about making America rich again and making America great again, and it's happening, and it will happen rather quickly. There'll be a little disturbance, but we're okay with that.
On television, officials have to respond to diplomacy that's being done via social media.
This was posted by the Chinese embassy. Quote, if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. As Secretary of Defense, how do you take that?
Well, we're prepared. Those who long for peace must prepare for war. That's why we're rebuilding our military. That's why we're reestablishing deterrence and the warrior ethos, is because we live in a dangerous world with powerful, ascendant countries with very different ideologies.
Car makers in North America fear the tariffs will punish them. Vehicles and parts frequently go back and forward over the Canadian and Mexican borders. They've been given a 1-month exemption from the 25% levy. After that, the administration says they should move their factories to the US.
God bless America.
President Trump enjoys the enthusiastic backing of his Republican colleagues, even those who used to advocate for free trade and back strong US support for Ukraine. They are now cheering on his approach to peacemaking, even though he appears to be being much tougher on Ukraine than he is on Russia.
Now, here at the White House today, there are clear signs that there is an optimistic sense of repairing the relationship between the US and Ukraine. We've heard from the CIA director, who said that the pause in military aid and intelligence sharing could be lifted quite soon once relations are repaired and once agreement has been reached. We know that the National Security Advisor from America has been talking to his counterpart in Ukraine. And we heard from President Zelensky as well. He said that those talks have produced what he described as some forward momentum, and said he hopes to see some results as early as next week. But of course, this has all only come about because President Zelensky has been forced essentially to submit himself to Donald Trump's version of how this peace process is going to go. He came here to the White House last week asking for some security guarantees, and as we know, that became an explosive splat in the Oval Office. Well, now President Zelensky can get back into these negotiations, back on America's good side, and maybe even have all of the military aid restored, only if he agrees to do it Donald Trump's way. And he has, said what he feels he has to in order to try and patch up that relationship. And it seems to be working.
OK, thank you. Sarah Smith reporting there. So what's been the reaction among US lawmakers to the pause in military aid and intelligence to Ukraine? Tom Bateman's been speaking to Republican and Democrat senators, many of whom voted for the assistance to Ukraine and who've now seen their decision overturned by the president.
For Democrats in Congress, the smiles were only for the camera. They're fuming at President Trump's treatment of Ukraine and his suspension of military and intelligence support.
I think this is a betrayal of Congress's intent. We have been very clear, and to halt already approved military support is just fundamentally, unacceptable. And we're going to do everything we can to stand with Ukraine and support them.
One voting president.
Last spring, Congress passed a $60 billion weapons package for Ukraine, and Democrats now question the legality of suspending it.
Cessation of aid, military aid that Congress has appropriated, I think is illegal. And the cessation of intelligence sharing is a huge mistake.
Republicans have always been more divided on aid for Ukraine. In the months after Russia's invasion, some of them travelled to Kyiv shoulder to shoulder with President Zelensky, among them Senator John Cornyn.
What I'd like to hear now is what Mr. Putin's willing to contribute to the negotiations. So far, we've just heard what is Ukraine willing to do, and I think without a credible offer by Mr. Putin, it's hard to see where this will go.
But many of Mr. Trump's Republicans see his hard line as a way of leveraging Europe to better defend itself.
I've spent time with some of our European countries. They don't want to do their part in defense. They just want us to do it. You can't expect American taxpayers and men and women to do all this. The Europeans got to have to start standing up.
What concessions should Vladimir Putin make in order to reach this peace?
I have no idea.
No idea on Russian concessions, and none so far from the White House either. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Washington.
Let's go straight to our correspondent James Waterhouse, who's in Kyiv for us. And James, how do you see relations between Kyiv and Washington tonight?
Well, Rita, there's an increasing chasm between the political optimism you've seen there, far from here, and the realities on the ground, the actions that are being taken. The pausing of American aid was bad enough for President Zelensky, who's looking to European Union leaders this week as one of the last avenues, really, for a friendly shoulder to lean on, shall we say. But then the pausing of American intelligence, well, that keeps cities like Kyiv, where I am now, safe. It is information from America that allows air alerts to be sounded for people to head to the shelter. It tells people where the drones are, in what directions they're heading in. It allows Ukrainian soldiers to know where Russian troops are, Russian troops that continue to invade Ukraine. It allows Ukraine to launch long-range missile strikes. And the question now is, how far is Donald Trump willing to go with this political levering? At best, it is a reckless gamble with Ukraine's future, and with Russia showing no signs of curbing its ambitions of taking the whole of Ukraine. If you look at the evidence now, we are heading towards some kind of peace which favours Moscow and not Kyiv.
James, thank you. James Waterhouse there. Well, as we've heard, despite the suspension of US intelligence, Washington and Kyiv have both said tonight that both sides are aiming to hold talks to discuss a potential peace plan. Here's James Landale with more on what any agreement might involve. James.
Rita, thank you. So what are the elements of a peace deal that might be discussed? Well, as we've just been hearing, it's still very, very early days. But a few clues emerged at the Lancaster House talks at the weekend. President Macron suggested a temporary partial truce. This would cover attacks in the air, on the sea and against power plants, but not fighting on the ground in the east. And President Zelensky echoed this in a tweet, saying that a truce could involve a release of prisoners, a ban on missiles and drones, attacks on civilian infrastructure, and only, of course, if Russia would do the same. The idea is that a truce would be a start. It would test Russia's good faith, give Donald Trump an early win, and potentially create space for talks about a more lasting ceasefire. And if that were agreed, then Britain, France, and maybe some others would deploy a reassurance force to Ukraine to deter future Russian aggression, as the French president set out this evening.
Ukraine must not be invaded again by Russia. and we have to prepare for that. We have to support the Ukrainian army, and it may well be that we can do that through the deployment of European forces.
But all this presumes Donald Trump is on board, and he won't agree a deal without getting access to Ukrainian minerals, and he doesn't want the US military to help secure Ukraine's future. And let's not forget the Russians. Vladimir Putin wants Ukraine to be neutral outside NATO and demilitarized. He also wants to keep the territory he's seized and more in these regions here in red, and he doesn't want any European force here on Ukrainian soil. Now, critics say that what Russia wants, the US can't deliver, and the Ukrainians won't accept.
Nothing much is going to happen in this until the Russians make up their mind whether they want to stick with their pretty maximalist demands or can back down a bit. Unless they can do that, then I think the Trump administration will find it difficult to take this very far forward.
So for all the fast diplomatic movement, agreement between these two may yet be still some way off. Rita.
James, thank you.